Hey everyone.
Hi. Happy Sunday.
Welcome. Happy Sunday. I'm just gonna try to see if I can get this to tilt down a little bit more. There we go. Be able to see us a little bit better, hopefully. All right, so we are at episode 35 and of No More Some Days. And tonight, Matt has some ideas about or some questions and things that we're going to talk about regarding failure.
Yeah, thanks for joining again. Sorry for being a few minutes late, but we just want to talk tonight a little bit about failure and how to reframe that, and how successful people think about failure as opposed to how we generally tend to think about and frame failure. And I was thinking some about this, and there was a quote that I heard one time that successful people don't worry about failure, they worry about regret. And so the idea being, instead of always being concerned about how they're going to look when they fail or something doesn't work out as they would expect, they're more concerned about regretting and not going after what they want.
Right.
And at the end of their life coming to face that, oh, I didn't do XYZ, I didn't accomplish XYZ just because I was afraid of failing.
Right.
And there's a famous book, started out I think as an article, but from somebody who worked with the elderly in nursing homes and things of that nature. And she's written a book basically called 5 Regrets of the Dying. But these are 5 things that kind of everybody seems to regret at the end of their life. The vast majority seem to regret. And I'll just run through these really quickly. And I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I had let myself be happier. And so several of those, I think, directly relate to this topic of failure and how we can let that kind of control our lives. So that's kind of what it's going to guide our discussion. So does that make any thoughts on those initially?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, I think you mentioned this a few months ago with the Slight Edge, and he talks about like how many people are at your gravesite funeral, right? Mm-hmm. And just how poignant that is. And thinking about, how are you living your life and how are you thinking about things? Is it framed by the people around you and just what is the social norm or accepted? Or is it really shaped by the goals that you have in your life, for your life? Is it really shaped by, faith is really important to you? Is it shaped by living true to God's word no matter what? If it's, you have a specific vision for your family or how you want things to function within your family unit, and building those relationships and cultivating, raising children, whatever it is, really are you shaping and guiding your life based on those principles rather than what other people expect of you? I think that's one of the hardest things, honestly. I mean, I know I've struggled with that. I've talked to so many other people who've struggled with that. We all, I think, struggle with this comparison game and wanting to please other people all the time. And we're not really living the life that we know we could be living because we're so afraid to, offend somebody or to even, in some cases, I think, step on people's toes to where we almost are afraid that they're going to feel less than because we're pursuing something bigger, if that makes sense. And so then that can cause a chasm in relationships, and, it can keep going. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that just stuck out for me in this list. I feel like we could keep going too. Just, I loved the last one. I wish I had let myself be happier. I think there's so many times we get caught up on things that are little in life that don't really have a lot of bigger meaning and importance, like the things that are like the big rocks in our jar. My mom went to this ladies retreat one time and they had these big rocks and then littler rocks, and they were basically essentially saying that your life was like this ball jar, and whatever your big rocks were like the important ones, and everything else was kind of small stuff, right? And so really, the point is that your big things are going to be the big things, and everything else is the small stuff and can kind of fit in the cracks. And so, of course, the big thing was like God. And so, when I reflect back on, okay, how could I allow myself to be happier in other times and then do that moving forward? I think about things like that. Like, am I really keeping the big things, like my relationship with God, as the big thing? Or am I sweating the small stuff and constantly focusing on the small things and allowing that to get in the way of my happiness and my having deeper relationships and better friendships and so on?
Yeah, that definitely can be, I think, an obstacle that we can run into if we're not careful. So, kind of what we want to use the rest of our time to reframe, give you some tips on how to reframe failure, again, because so often we're paralyzed by the fear of failure, or looking stupid, or looking like we don't know what we're talking about, or even going after a big goal and then we not accomplishing it and feeling that we've wasted that time. So one way that we can reframe failure is by realizing there's a difference between failing and being a failure. I think oftentimes we kind of confuse the two.
Right.
Whereas being a failure would be somebody who is constantly doing things wrong, is not a good person, is doing things intentionally for the wrong reasons, or the wrong things intentionally, and there's intentionality to what they're doing.
Right.
But failure is an instance, is a moment in time.
Right.
Failure is coming up short of a goal that you still went after. Failure is maybe your business even not having to close your business. But that doesn't mean, again, you can't open another business. That doesn't mean that you are a failure. That's business failed. And separating the instant of failure from yourself, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think we take on that failure and say it has everything to do with me, and then I'm a failure and everything, when really it's just that we failed to do that thing. I think that, oh man, that's so important. I feel like I've had to learn that lesson over and over again in my life. Whether it's I've gone after a goal with, auditioning or applying for a job, or even in building my Arbonne business, reaching out to people. Sometimes it's so easy to be like, I'm a failure because this person said no to me, or because I didn't win this or didn't reach this goal. But really, we need to take it away from, it's not a personal thing. It's just a part of the journey. Like, you're going to stumble, you're going to have things on a journey that aren't going to be perfect. Maybe you have to take a detour, but it doesn't mean that you can't continue on that journey. Anytime I think about failure, I think of John Maxwell's book. I know Matt's not really a John Maxwell fan, called Failing Forward. And his whole point with that is every failure can lead you to where you need to be for success, and that when you're failing, we can take failure on a failure trajectory, if you will, like you're continuing down the failure path, if you will. But we can also take failure and see it as an opportunity to continue to grow and go that next step.
Yeah, I think that's another way we can reframe it too, is that failure is feedback. It's not final.
Right.
And so when you do fail, are you taking the lessons from that failure and applying it to whatever your next venture is, your next milestone, your next goal, whatever it is? Are you taking those opportunities to learn, or are you just discarding them and going back to bad habits? Like the example of, if you have to close a business, then do you start a new one? Have you taken those lessons and learned, or are you still just going to apply the same principles?
Right. Totally agree.
So another way I think we can reframe failure is by realizing that sometimes the messes we get in can become our message. I think that's a really important way, because sometimes the bad things that happen to us, or that maybe we've even had a part in, if we let that become our message, that can be something that we can help other people with. Yeah. It can become, like, for example, if you had a struggle with weight and you've lost that weight loss,
right.
There can be a lot of guilt with weight and gaining weight. That's your mess, if you will. But fighting that, overcoming it, can become your message to help inspire other people. It could be a launching board for a business, a launching board for a book. It could be whatever.
Yeah.
And so our mess, a lot of times, I think, if you our pain points a lot of times turn into the things we're most passionate about and the things we're most gifted in helping other people with.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think there's so much power in, you know, when you read a book or you hear the story behind a business, or when you hear from a speaker that has gone on to whatever, help all these hundreds or thousands of people. I mean, there's something impactful when you hear their story and you kind of hear their mess a little bit, and you're able to draw inspiration from that and go, if they got in a mess and they got themselves out of it and they kept going on their path and they got to where they wanted to go, and they're still on the journey, I can do it too. You know, it makes it seem a lot more possible, like if they can do it, I can do it, you know? And I think we need people in our lives like that. And to think you could be that person for somebody else is like, I just love that idea. I love thinking, hey, if I could impact one person. I know when we started this series, it was like, if we could just impact one person, you know, and help. And what's been so great on this journey of even having this video series is we've had people reach out to us, various people saying that it's already helped them, and so it's definitely been more than one already, which has been such a gift. But I just love that. I love that you can inspire somebody through your own mess, your own trials.
And I think the hard part about that one, though, is that it takes a lot of vulnerability to let people into your mess, and to let people see that.
Yeah.
And again, there's a difference between just blurting everything out there and like have an explosion of your mess,
like vomiting all the things.
There's a difference between that and tactically sharing and using that to boost other people.
Yeah.
But I think it takes a lot of courage. It takes some vulnerability, and it takes overcoming that fear of being potentially judged for that, whatever that is. It could be a myriad of different things. But especially depending on the culture and background you're from, there can be even more guilt and fear associated with letting people see a side of you that may not be as clean or as, you know, shiny and bright as we would like to appear sometimes.
Yeah, the Instagram highlight reel or whatever. It does take a lot of courage. And there's a lot of shame that comes with that too, I think sometimes too. You know, you're like, I'm ashamed that I was dealing with whatever, but at the same time, I think we can, again, it's an opportunity to lean into this and have some real emotional connection, not just with your audience or people you're trying to help, but even people in your life, by sharing this and saying, look, I need to improve in this area, or this is how I've grown, or this is who I am, but you know, this is who I am, but that's separate than what I've done, and the things that I've struggled with. So I think there's just so much, there's a lot of layers there that you can unpack, and you can continue to not only share with an audience, if you will, but then also share just with people in your lives, you know, one-on-one, individually, you know, at a coffee shop, in a beautiful way.
Vulnerability is kind of a buzzword right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of cool to be vulnerable in a way. It's
hard, but it's cool.
Well, I mean, it is. People act like it's cool and act like they're being, you know, very brave to be vulnerable. Not to say it's not, but it is kind of an in thing to be now. And people like can authentic. Even overshare in some instances, in my opinion.
Right. Yes.
So do you think there's a line of being too vulnerable or oversharing too much? And how do you find that line?
Yeah, I mean, this can be really tough. I mean, my personal opinion has everything to do with who are you talking to and where are they engaging that. You know, if it's on social media, you could be talking to a myriad of people. So for me, I try to keep it, you know, minimal details, just because I'm trying, you know, giving broad understanding, but maybe minimal details, because again, there is such a thing, I believe, as oversharing. And also I want to do that in the appropriate venue. And me shouting in the middle of a bus station about every single thing that's happened in my life or every single thing that I've struggled with is not appropriate. And so it's the same thing with a Facebook feed or whatever. So I try to give glimpses, sort of like there's a curtain there. You kind of see glimpses, you see shadows, but you don't see the whole thing. And then in one-on-one conversations, in maybe even a private group or in a private message of some kind, maybe a voice memo or face-to-face memo that you can do on different apps if we can't be in person. I try to share more details. I think one reason that can be incredibly helpful, again, not oversharing, but I think one reason that can be incredibly helpful is it does help maybe to shed light on what you've gone through, especially if it's going to help someone. And then also it can be a way to, again, appropriately doing so. I tried to also think of, maybe I don't need to go into every detail about what I felt or everything else. Just try to gauge it based on who it is, where they are in their life. If I know somebody like struggles with a certain thing, but I'm really good in that area, I'm not going to maybe talk to them as much about that thing because I know that they're struggling with that. I don't want to rub that in their faces, So it's that sort of thing. You have to gauge, you have to listen to your heart and your gut. But I do share some details too, because especially when you're connecting and you can't really be in person, it can still be a great way to connect with someone and still be able to share a part of who you are.
Yeah.
So that's my best judgment as far as how I see it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you have to be mindful of the audience, mindful of what your comfort level is, mindful of the other person's comfort with where you're at, and like you said, it's going to depend on who your audience is, the size of the audience, and the context of the conversation. Yeah. Okay, so this next one is kind of how can you reframe failure, where how can you kind of make it okay for you to fail, even when you're going into a situation, to set yourself up for it to be a good outcome. And so you have to put, I think we would both agree that it's important that you put yourself in places where there's the potential that you might lose.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But in those instances, you can still win even if you lose.
Yes.
So for an example, just practically, for when I'm playing basketball, I try to always guard the best player, or at least somebody who's as good as me. Not somebody who's less, that's going to be easy, but somebody who's as good or better than me. Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be several things that are going to happen. One, the person is going to score more, and I'm going to look stupid. In that case, I technically lose. Mm-hmm. But in those instances, I'm going to get better because I can learn, why did they get around me? Why were they better? Why was I not whatever? Why was my defense not good enough? As opposed to if I was playing somebody who I was a lot better than, what really am I learning there?
Right.
Not a lot. And so even in these instances where you're stretching yourself, you can think, okay, I may not get the outcome I want. I may not win. I may not reach my goal, but how can I still win even by losing? I think is a really important mind shift.
Yeah, I mean, especially when winning is so glorified, these days. They're like, well, if you didn't win, you're just a loser,
Yeah.
But there's so much that we can learn from losing or from not hitting our goal or whatever it is. Like you said, some people even say you either win or you learn, and I think that's a good way of looking at it, because if you go in with that mindset, like I'm either going to learn or I'm going to win, I think that's a good way of looking at a situation. Like, even if somebody says no to me or like, you could think of different situations where I've been trying to stretch myself and grow as a player, violin player, or musically. If I'm only in a pond with people who are not as good as I am, and I'm not hanging around with people that are better than I am and are pushing me, then how do I expect to get better? Because I'm just in the same pond where I'm a big fish, and that's pretty much it. I'm not really growing and stretching myself. And so I think if you go into that mindset with, like, it kind of reminds me at the beginning of when I started Bar Method a year ago. Like, I told the instructor, she didn't really like this, but I was like, I stunk at the beginning. I'm not mad at myself about that. It's okay. I'm not upset. But I wasn't good at it, and that's okay. I'm actually really okay with that. I liked it because I wasn't good at it. I knew I was stretching myself. Like, I knew I would learn something different. I knew that it was the beginning of something where I could start to grow and get better. And I have seen improvement in the year that I've done it, and I'm sure I will continue to see improvement as I consistently do it. And so I think when you see that you're like, it's okay to be bad at something at the beginning. I think a lot of the time too, that's like a part of our like failing is, oh, well, I'm bad at it. Well, everybody starts out bad at something. You know, like I didn't start out violin like I'm amazing. Nope. So we all start out as like bad at something, and then we develop the skills that it requires, and do some of that work we were talking about last week.
Yeah, I think it's so many people are afraid to look like they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And because it's a scary position to be in.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of others will make fun of you. Others will say, "Oh, look at them, they messed up. Oh, how could they?" While they're the people that are not challenging themselves and are playing in the pool with people of their same level and are always going to be in that pool.
Right.
And you referenced the pond. Many people, if they spoke honestly, would rather be the big fish in the small pond as opposed to the small fish in a big pond.
Right.
And that's just not an area of growth. That's not you're not going to grow that way.
Yes.
It's safe, it's comfortable, but you're always going to know in the back of your mind that you didn't actually push yourself.
Yeah.
And that small pond might dry out eventually, and then no fish will be in it.
Yeah. No, so true.
So the next reframe is this kind of sparked my thinking. It's from a show called Meat Eater on Netflix, and it's a hunting show. But one of the things that he said in a particular hunt was that there's more to the hunt than killing the animal. Of course, they're always going after the goal. In this case, it was a moose, which was a big hunt, and they didn't end up getting one.
Right.
But as you talked about, it was the process of being out in nature, being with this guy that had so much experience, that he was like once in a lifetime opportunity. Being, learning the signs, being in nature, enjoying creation, whatever it is. And the important point is that if we have to be doing things, that we love the process and the journey, regardless of we may not end up hitting our goal. Are we still going to be okay with that process? Are we still going to have learned something from the journey?
Right.
Because if we're just chasing this goal that we really hate the process, which is in a lot of cases maybe a financial goal that we're putting everything we can into our 9-to-5, or putting everything we can into a business, and we actually hate the process, then if we don't get it, then it's all going to have been for nothing.
Yeah, I think there's so much, we have to really, I think it's just important that we continually reevaluate what really do I enjoy, like what really lights me up, what are the things that in 20 years I'm going to still love doing, who are the people I want to surround myself with, what kind of things, practices do we want to, or I don't know, day-to-day living do I want to have with my family, who is in my life, who's important to me, what kind of things do you want to do on a daily basis. And I think, yes, that's long-term thinking, but it's helping you to stay on the goal, because if you don't have a destination, a clear destination, you don't know where you're going. And I do think that as we go on the journey, it gets clearer. And so I think as you continue, and we've experienced this too, as you continue to just sharpen that image and focus in on that goal and get clearer on, okay, this is where I want to go, then I think it brings a lot of that excess out of it, and we're able to focus more on the things that really do bring us enjoyment and really do keep us on that right track. But it's sort of like a process. I feel like, again, life can be so much of a process of like pulling away that excess and that stuff that doesn't really bring us joy, and making room for the things that do really bring us joy, the things that do really fill us up, the things that do really keep us on our goals, and in our case, help us to continue to do important work for the Lord, and develop our faith as well.
And I think that's where, if you're enjoying the process, that also totally changes failure. It's from not like, oh, that didn't work, how could that not work, to, that didn't work, what can I try next? Mm-hmm. And it becomes more of a curious thing. It becomes more of an exploration. It becomes a game even, to figure out, okay, that didn't work, why not? Right. I can try this now. And so that's another thing that makes failure a lot more digestible.
Yeah, and fun.
And fun in some ways, is because it's part of the process. It's part of the game that you're playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so finally, just another kind of way to reframe it is that challenges or failures are going to come regardless. Life is just that way. Yeah. Regardless of what we do, we're all going to have challenges. So you might as well pick the ones that you want to tackle.
Yes.
As opposed to the ones that come because you've just been floating along and not been goal setting, not been chasing the things you want to chase. So better to pick the challenges that you have chosen as opposed to the ones that come your way from either a boss or from circumstances outside of your control. So better to try to control the controllables and go after the challenges that you're excited about, like Megan said, that light you up, and they're going to bring you happiness down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's positions we can put ourselves in to help us to grow so that when even challenges come that we can't anticipate, we've grown ourselves to a point where we are starting to think on a for the lack of a better word, higher level, that we're starting to see, okay, this is a small thing in comparison, or this is, I have my priorities really clear in my mind. We've developed a really good system, or whatever you want to, however you want to see it, if it's family life or if it's, a work life, however, that you have such a clear idea in your mind that it makes those challenges seem a lot more doable and a lot less intimidating, because you've continually worked on growing yourself and putting yourself in those situations that are uncomfortable. And I think we've even seen this ourselves. When something comes up, it used to be like a bigger deal for something kind of to be thrown at us. And I feel like now too, because we've been working on some of these goals and looking ahead and creating a vision and getting clearer as we go along, that it does, in growing ourselves, it does make it easier when some of these things come along to think about, to kind of back up and look at the big picture and go, okay, well, if we do this, then we can start to tackle this. And it doesn't mean we do it alone, but it does mean that we have so much of it seems so much more doable than it has in the past.
Yeah, and it's just, if anything, the more practice you put in, the more you're going to be able to put those previous lessons into practice in future ones. And that's also part of building your faith, as you've seen how things have worked out in the past. And so now, okay, we've built the skill set up. Now we can use those past experiences towards this problem, this goal that we have, because we've learned all the lessons from the past, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of have that arsenal of things to be able to tackle new challenges.
Well, I think that's all that we had. Hopefully that gives you some ideas of how to reframe failure. I know that's been something that's been very helpful for me in coming across things that scare me and that you initially want to resist, but thinking about some of these ways to reframe it hopefully gives you a toolbox to tackle some of those. If you have any more that you've used in the past, feel free to let us know. And if there's any kind of topics you would like us to address in future episodes, let us know as well. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just continue to follow us on Instagram at No More Some Days with a Z. And we are still honoring that once we get to 1,000 followers, right? That we're going to...
No, we're doing 100 each.
Oh, I'm sorry, 100. Excuse me. I went
every
too far. Every 100, we're going to do a giveaway. And also go ahead and follow or subscribe and share on our YouTube channel, No More Some Days. We would love to connect with you there. If you watch us on YouTube, a special shout out to you. Please leave your comments. We would love to hear from you. And I think that's all that we have.
Thank you guys. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.